What if I told you Prince Harry just got slammed with a judge's fury? All because he couldn't let go of 3 little letters. HRH. 3 letters. That's all it took to trigger an international scandal. 3 letters that once symbolized dignity, duty, and bloodline, now reduced to a weapon in a courtroom. But here's the real kicker. He was told never to use them again. Not in emails, not in contracts, not even in whispers. And yet, somehow here we are. With a furious judge, a massive fine, and a royal family more fractured than ever. So what exactly happened? Why is Prince Harry, once the world's most beloved royal, being accused of extortion tied to a title he no longer owns? This isn't just a courtroom story. It's about obsession, identity, and a man who may have gone too far in trying to cash in on the very system he once fled. And yes, Meghan's name comes up. Oh, does it come up? But before we get to the whispers inside Montecito's gates, the secret memo from a former royal staffer, and the judge's scathing rebuke that left even the tabloids stunned, let's rewind. Because to understand why Harry's being fined for using HRH, we need to understand what that title really means, and why giving it up might have cost him more than just status. It may have cost him his identity. Let's dive in. Flashback, the night the crown fell. It was January 2020. Sandringham was cloaked in fog, both literal and metaphorical. Inside the Queen's private estate, the air was tight, silent, tense. Prince Charles sat stone-faced, William cold, and Harry, fidgeting. Meghan was back in Canada with Archie, but Harry? He had to face the music. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And what music it was. He wanted out, not just from royal duties, but from the institution itself. The Queen listened, nodded, and then, with a voice colder than the Norfolk frost, she laid down the law. You may remain Duke. You may remain a prince by birth. But your military appointments? Gone. Royal funds? Cut. And the title of His Royal Highness? That, too, must be surrendered. That was the price. And Harry accepted, or so he thought. Because what happened next, what's now confirmed through court records and leaked emails, suggests Harry never truly let go of HRH. Not emotionally, not financially, and certainly not legally. The power of a title. Let's get something straight. HRH isn't just a vanity tag. It's not just fancy stationery and embossed napkins. It's power. Legally speaking, His Royal Highness denotes proximity to the crown. It carries implications of status, protection, and yes, influence. Would a billionaire hedge fund manager return your call if your email read, Mr. Harry Windsor? Now compare that to HRH Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. One opens doors, the other, not so much. And for someone building a brand in America, someone launching podcasts, docuseries, memoirs, and speaking gigs at $1 million a pop, what's the difference between just Prince Harry and HRH Prince Harry? Millions. Literally, millions. Which is why the judge's ruling this week isn't just a fine, it's a reckoning. Because now, the court is alleging that Harry didn't just forget the rules. He knowingly used a title he wasn't allowed to use. To gain money, influence, and access. And that's where the word extortion comes in. Yes, that's the term being whispered behind courthouse doors and inside royal hallways. Extortion. From a prince. How did it come to this? Meghan's mirror. Now let's talk about the elephant in the palace. Meghan. Was she involved? Depends who you ask. Supporters say she's being scapegoated. That she didn't send the emails. Didn't make the calls. But leaked documents suggest otherwise. One former staffer claims Meghan had a role in how branding materials were approved, including uses of HRH on sponsorship decks. Another says she warned Harry. We need to be careful. They're watching. But did he listen? Or did he think, like some royal critics allege, that the monarchy would never dare to go after him publicly? Either way, the judge did go after him. And it wasn't subtle. In a scathing verdict, the court fined Harry for knowingly misrepresenting his title in a financial deal involving a foreign luxury brand. The amount? Not disclosed. But insiders say it's hefty enough to hurt and symbolic enough to sting. The tip-off. So how did this even land in court? Was it a disgruntled partner? A lawyer with a grudge? Or, brace yourself, a royal mole? Rumor has it the tip-off came from within the royal ecosystem. Someone with access to communications. Someone who knew Harry was using the title, and who finally had enough. There are whispers, loud ones, that it may have been an ex-employee from the Archwell Foundation, one who left under amicable terms, but with a USB drive full of receipts. That same source allegedly handed over the now infamous email. HRH Prince Harry would be delighted to attend, pinning honorarium. The keyword? HRH. That was the fuse. And the explosion? Still happening. Why now? That's the question echoing across newsrooms and social media platforms. Why is this happening now? Is it because the royal family is tired of being mocked? Is it Charles making a statement about legacy, order, and consequence? Or is it something darker, an attempt to shut Harry down before he drops another bombshell memoir? There's another theory, that the palace didn't push this, but once the courts got involved, they didn't stop it either. They let it burn. Some say it's poetic justice. Others say it's cruel. You'll decide. The public reaction. If you thought the Oprah interview broke the internet, this ruling cracked it wide open. Twitter is ablaze. UK tabloids have declared it the final fall of Prince Harry. US networks are scrambling for comment. And on Reddit, conspiracy theories galore. Is this the beginning of the end for Archwell? Will Netflix pull out of future deals? Is Meghan secretly planning to relaunch under her maiden name? And here's the wildest one we've seen so far. That King Charles had been waiting for this moment, patiently collecting evidence, quietly keeping legal counsel, and finally made his move. Whether or not that's true, one thing's clear. This scandal has everyone talking. And yet, Harry himself has said nothing. Not a tweet, not a statement, not a sigh. Which begs the question, is this silent strategy or surrender? What's at stake? This isn't just about fines. It's about legacy. It's about whether Prince Harry is still the rebel prince or just another fallen celebrity trying to hold on to relevance with a royal coat of paint. Because let's not forget, his title was supposed to be sacred, not for sale, not for leverage. And now, a judge says he used it to extort money. Let that sink in. Extort. Money. Using a royal title. If that's true, then this isn't just a legal issue. It's a full-blown identity crisis. The monarchy stripped him of HRH to protect its dignity. And now, Harry may have shattered it all over again by pretending he never lost it. But what if Harry didn't act alone? What if someone else encouraged the title's quiet resurrection? A PR strategist? A business manager? A family member? Or, more chilling still, what if Harry himself believed that he was still entitled to the crown, regardless of what Buckingham Palace said? The line between entitlement and delusion is razor thin. And as the evidence piles up, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a slip-up. This may have been a plan. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Let's rewind the clock, not to when the judge pounded the gavel, not to when Harry fled the palace, but to a moment most people barely noticed. A detail buried in the fine print of royal exit protocols. January 18th, 2020. A royal statement, stiff and sterile in tone, was released from Buckingham Palace. It read, "The Sussexes will no longer use their HRH titles as they are no longer working members of the royal family." Did you catch that? Not stripped of, not revoked. Will no longer use. It was an instruction, not an enforcement. A public boundary drawn in royal ink, but not one carved in legal stone. And from that moment on, everything about the way Prince Harry presented himself, online, in business, in negotiations, would become a tightrope walk between branding and betrayal. Because what happens when the line isn't legal, but symbolic? What happens when you're told to stop using HRH, but the law doesn't explicitly prohibit it? For someone like Harry, trapped between royal blood and Hollywood branding, that's not a rule. That's a temptation. And he didn't just flirt with it. He used it. The first cracks in the royal wall. Insiders say the rot started early. Within weeks of Megxit, eagle-eyed reporters spotted subtle branding choices on marketing documents, business decks, and website headers associated with Archwell. In one version of the charity's registration form, later replaced, a draft listed the founder's name as HRH Prince Henry Charles Albert David Duke of Sussex. Now that's his full name. But the HRH? That's the fire alarm. And while the form was pulled and re-uploaded with corrected language, the fact that it ever existed raised eyebrows. Was it a mistake? Or a quiet test to see if anyone would notice? Some insiders believe Harry and Meghan were testing the boundaries, feeling out just how much public and institutional pushback they would get if they gently tiptoed across the HRH line. And when no lawsuits came, no press releases slammed them, and no royal guards rode up to Montecito on horseback, they kept walking. Emails that spoke louder than crowns. It started with one, then two, then a pattern. Multiple leaked emails, now part of the court-sealed archive, show a disturbing trend. In communication with event planners, corporate sponsors, and luxury brands, the signature block allegedly used by Harry read, HRH Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. That prefix, those 3 letters, weren't just relics of his past. They were being actively included in negotiations that involved appearance fees, speaking payments, and branding tie-ins. Think about that for a second. You're the CEO of a luxury hotel chain in Dubai. You receive an email from HRH Prince Harry, asking if you'd be interested in co-sponsoring a humanitarian summit. You Google it, he's a prince. Married to Meghan Markle. Exiled, yes, but still very much in the headlines. You say yes. Now, would you have said yes if the email simply read, Harry Windsor, California resident? Do you see the difference? Do you see the implication? This is what the judge saw too. Because while Harry may have told the public that he had no intention of using the title, the evidence now shows otherwise. And worse, he allegedly profited from it. Royal branding, weapon, or legacy. Let's talk psychology for a second. When you grow up with the title His Royal Highness, it becomes more than just a form of address. It becomes armor, identity, a silent passkey to any room on earth. And when you lose it, well, imagine being raised in a palace, then waking up one day in a California mansion and realizing no one bows anymore. No one curtsies. No one waits for you to speak first. The transition from royal to civilian isn't just cultural, it's psychological disintegration. And for Harry, sources say, it was devastating. He had said goodbye to the system, but the system had built him. So perhaps it wasn't shocking when traces of HRH started popping up again. Not in loud, screaming headlines, but in whisper-quiet footers, buried signature lines, and internal documents never meant to see the light of day. Except one of them did. And that's when everything changed. The brand deal that backfired. It was supposed to be a quick win. A luxury fragrance company based in the Middle East allegedly reached out to Harry's team about a private gala appearance. Casual, intimate, discreet. The deal? 6 figures for a brief appearance, a speech on climate change, and photo ops. But when the brand received the digital proposal, complete with Harry's crest and signature, the document reportedly read, HRH Prince Harry is pleased to confirm his attendance. That was the moment the brand hesitated. Something didn't feel right. Why was he using HRH? Was that allowed? They consulted a UK legal advisor. The advisor's response? Flatly, no. That's forbidden by royal agreement. The brand backed out immediately, but not before forwarding the documents to someone much higher up. And that someone, they didn't just file it away. They reported it to the UK legal system. When silence becomes strategy, what followed was radio silence. Not from Harry, but from the palace. No press release. No leaks. No statements. That's what made it eerie. Because if there's one thing the royal family has mastered over the centuries, it's passive punishment. They don't yell. They withdraw. And in this case, the silence was more deafening than any scandal. Insiders say King Charles was briefed within hours of the email surfacing. Prince William, too. But neither said a word. No calls to Montecito. No olive branches. No demands. Instead, the palace let the legal system do the talking. And when the hammer came down, when the judge issued a statement condemning the use of HRH in financial dealings, it was brutal. Not just in tone, but in precision. The verdict was clear. Prince Harry had crossed a line, and he would be fined. Fined for a title. Now let's pause. This isn't just a slap on the wrist. This is legal precedent. For the first time in modern history, a senior royal, or former one, has been fined for the misuse of a royal title. That's monumental. And here's the thing, the amount doesn't matter. Whether it was £5,000 or £500,000 is irrelevant. What matters is the statement it made. That even a duke, even a prince, can be held accountable when he tries to play both sides of the royal fence. And you have to ask, why risk it? Why flirt with scandal, court, and condemnation? all for 3 letters. Maybe because without them, the brand falls apart. Maybe because Harry isn't enough anymore. Or maybe, just maybe, because someone else told him it was okay to use it. Someone very close. But we'll get to her soon. What the royals said behind closed doors. Privately, sources say the Windsors were livid. Prince William reportedly told aides he knew the rules. He agreed to them. This isn't a mistake, it's a choice. Charles was said to be visibly shaken when the judgment came through. Not because of the legal consequence, but the public humiliation. The monarchy's golden rule is discretion. Harry shattered that. Again. But the most scathing reaction came from a surprising corner. Princess Anne. According to royal insiders, she said in private, he's trading the crown for cash and dragging all of us with him. That kind of bluntness from the famously stoic Anne? Unprecedented, but perhaps justified. Because as more leaked documents begin surfacing, it's becoming clear that this wasn't a one-off. This was a pattern, and worse, a calculated one. Which leads us to the question no one dares ask. Was Meghan involved? And if so, how deep does it go? Because just as the royal family braced for backlash, someone else stepped forward. Not a lawyer, not a palace insider, but a former Archwell employee, holding emails, memos, and documents that no one ever expected to go public. And once the court saw those, well, everything changed. Again, what if the most damaging evidence against Prince Harry wasn't leaked by the palace, but by someone who used to work for him? Every kingdom falls from within. Not with a bang, not with a sword, but with something far quieter. A whisper, a memo, a forwarded email. And for Prince Harry, that whisper came from someone who once called him boss. It wasn't a royal aide. It wasn't an undercover mole from the palace. It was someone from his own team, his own organization, who ultimately turned the tide. Because as the legal investigation heated up, the court didn't just rely on what the public could see. They were handed something far more damning. A trail of digital breadcrumbs. A sequence of emails. And one, in particular, that tore down the entire wall of plausible deniability. Let's go back to where it all began. The internal leak that rocked Montecito. We'll call her Emily. Not her real name, but her real job? Executive assistant at Archwell for nearly 18 months. Emily was there for the launch, the chaotic early months, the hiring, the branding meetings, the Zoom calls with attorneys, agents, publicists. She saw everything. And more importantly, she saved everything. Now, most people in her position would have left quietly when her contract ended. But Emily didn't. Because something didn't sit right with her. Not about the work. Not even about the mission. It was the signature. She remembered it like a red flag waving in slow motion. An email sent to a corporate sponsor. A standard pitch. Nothing too flashy, until she scrolled to the bottom. And there it was. HRH Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. Direct line, +1, ***. It stopped her cold. She remembered the palace agreement. The briefings. The legal language. They weren't supposed to be using HRH anymore. Not in print. Not in promotion. Not in anything. She flagged it to her manager. Got told. It's just a placeholder, don't worry. So she didn't say anything. Until now. The email chain that changed everything. The email wasn't a one-off. It was part of a chain, one of many, between Archwell and a high-end European lifestyle brand that wanted to partner on a sustainability initiative. The brand CEO had reached out through proper channels. The topic was green energy, and they wanted Harry as their keynote speaker at a private event in Monaco. The email exchange began innocently enough. But as negotiations evolved, moving from interest to compensation, Harry's title became more and more prominent in the discussion. One message, sent directly from Archwell's internal comms manager, allegedly read, HRH Prince Harry is honored to accept the invitation, pending final agreement on travel arrangements and appearance honorarium. Another, from an outside agency working with the Sussexes, added, as the Duke is a senior member of the royal family, discretion is paramount. But here's the twist. He wasn't. He hadn't been for years. And yet, that subtle implication, that Harry was still HRH, still royal, still active, was used as leverage in the negotiations. It wasn't just branding. It was misrepresentation. And that's the word the judge would later use in his furious ruling. Was it just a mistake? Let's be fair. In celebrity branding, mistakes happen all the time. Old signatures, outdated bios, missed details. These things can fall through the cracks. So could this just be an honest oversight? A forgotten footer? An unupdated document? Possibly. But here's the problem. Emily, the whistleblower, claimed this wasn't the only instance. She provided not one, not two, but 7 separate emails, each showing some form of HRH being used in negotiations, introductions, or correspondence related to money, media, or appearances. And not just by staffers. By Harry himself. One email, sent from his personal address, allegedly included the closing line. Warm regards, HRH Prince Harry. And that changed everything. Because it meant it wasn't just the team. It was him. The judge's perspective. When the court reviewed these emails, the tone of the case shifted dramatically. Before the documents were entered into the record, the case was seen as a minor legal scuffle, a branding blunder, a possible ethics violation. But afterward, the court saw intent, pattern, and profit. The judge's remarks, according to sources in the room, were searing. He called the repeated use of HRH in financial correspondence a deliberate and misleading invocation of royal authority. And then came the words that sent chills through every legal expert watching. This court finds the use of the title was employed not in error, but as a method of undue influence in commercial settings. Translated, that's legal speak for extortion light. Harry wasn't being accused of robbing a bank, but he was being accused of using something he no longer legally had, a title, to convince others to hand over money, access, and prestige. And for the British legal system, that's not just a slap on the wrist. That's a scandal. The royal family's hidden fingerprints. What's even more fascinating is how the royal family responded. Or rather, how they didn't. There was no public statement, no official response, not even a no comment. But insiders say the palace legal team had been quietly collecting evidence for months. One source claimed a dossier had been compiled with dozens of examples where Harry or his associates had misused HRH post-2020. Why wasn't this acted upon sooner? Simple. Timing. Some believe the palace waited for Harry to cross a line that couldn't be explained away. And when the emails were made public, when the court took notice, they let it unfold. Silently. Deliberately. Let the courts do the dirty work. And keep the royal hands clean. What was Meghan's role? Here's where things get even more tangled. Because while Harry's name was on the emails, Meghan's fingerprints weren't far behind. Emily claimed that Meghan had full visibility on most major communications involving branding deals, sponsorships, and public appearances. And while Meghan never signed anything as HRH, she also never corrected it. That silence, depending on who you ask, is either complicity or clever strategy. One former employee of Archwell alleged, everything went through her. If Harry was about to send something dumb, she'd stop him. So if those signatures went through, she saw them. She let them through. It's an explosive claim, and one that raises a darker question. Was this a calculated move by both of them? Or was Harry doing something behind Meghan's back? And if it was a plan, who stood to benefit the most? Emotional fallout. Harry's identity crisis. Let's pull back for a second. Because beneath the headlines, the courtroom drama, and the tabloid frenzy, there's a man at the center of this storm. And that man is Prince Harry, the boy who grew up in a palace, who watched his mother die in the harshest glare of the media, who walked behind her coffin before he even became a teenager. He didn't ask for this life. He was born into it. But now, he's fighting to both escape it and exploit it at the same time. That contradiction is what makes this story so tragic. He wants privacy, but he signs deals with Netflix. He wants to be a civilian, but he uses a royal title. He wants freedom, but only if it comes with a golden crown. And that's what makes these emails more than just legal missteps. They're a glimpse into a man divided, torn between past and present, legacy and liberty, love and loyalty. It's the most human part of the story, but it's also the most dangerous. Because when your identity is wrapped in a title you no longer own, what do you have left when they take it away? As the courtroom fallout continued, the press was still catching up, but someone else already knew. Someone who had been watching Harry's moves long before the emails surfaced. Someone with power, influence, and a personal score to settle. His name? Prince William. And his next move would hit harder than any courtroom verdict. What happens when a prince defies the crown? and the law decides to make an example of him? The courtroom was dead silent. Not the kind of silence you expect at a royal event. This wasn't a gala. This wasn't a christening. This wasn't a red carpet lined with flashes and flattery. No, this was the moment Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, stood face to face with the full weight of the law, without the protective veil of the palace, without royal immunity, without HRH to hide behind. And across the bench sat a judge who wasn't impressed by titles. He wasn't moved by bloodlines. He wasn't flattered by fame. He saw one thing: a man who had knowingly, repeatedly, and strategically used a title he had been asked, no, instructed, to let go of. And the judge was furious. The courtroom atmosphere, tension you could cut with a sword. Let's set the scene. London, early morning. A special hearing had been quietly scheduled. No fanfare, no media circus. This wasn't a criminal trial. But it wasn't minor either. It was procedural, until it wasn't. Harry had submitted a statement through his legal team. He wasn't present physically, but the energy in the room crackled with tension. Across the aisle sat a representative from the Crown's Legal Advisory Board. Not from the royal family itself, but someone who clearly wasn't happy to be dragged into this. The judge, a stern man with decades on the bench, had reviewed the emails, reviewed the witness statements, and reviewed the quiet tip-off that started it all. But it wasn't until he read Harry's own correspondence, the one signed HRH Prince Harry, that his tone shifted. He leaned forward. He removed his glasses. And what he said next sent shockwaves down the spine of everyone present. The ruling, a verbal execution. The judge began with composure, British restraint, legal niceties. But within minutes, the mask slipped. He called the use of HRH in business contexts a reckless breach of public trust. He said the evidence presented demonstrates a pattern of title misuse inconsistent with both the spirit and the letter of prior royal agreements. Then came the hammer. This court finds that the respondent, while no longer legally entitled to employ the prefix His Royal Highness, has done so knowingly, in pursuit of personal financial gain. Let that settle in. Not accidentally, not mistakenly, knowingly. That one word flipped the entire narrative. And then, the final blow. The court hereby imposes a financial penalty upon the respondent, reflective not only of the misused authority, but of the message it sends to the public, that even those of royal blood are not above the law. The fine, symbol over substance? So how much was the fine? That's the million-pound question. And ironically, it may have been less than expected. Sources estimate the amount was between £75,000 and £150,000, enough to sting, but not bankrupt. Why? Because this wasn't about draining Harry's wallet. It was about shattering his shield. In the eyes of the public, this fine wasn't about pounds. It was about power. And the message was clear: titles have limits. Even for princes. Harry's legal team reacts. Immediately after the verdict, Harry's attorneys went into damage control. They issued a soft statement, insisting that the title usage was unintentional, that any appearance of impropriety was administrative, and that Prince Harry respects the boundaries established by the monarchy and the law. But behind closed doors, panic. One insider described Archewell's inner circle as shaken and scrambling. Why? Because the judge's ruling wasn't just a slap, it was a precedent. If the courts could fine Harry for this, what's next? Civil lawsuits? Contract breaches? Revoked deals from corporations that believed they were working with a still royal figure? The ripple effects had only just begun. Enter Prince William, the final straw. While the courtroom held its breath, Prince William had already acted. According to royal insiders, William had been briefed about the HRH controversy months earlier. He had kept his cool. He had bitten his tongue. But once the verdict was public, once the judge's condemnation made front-page news, William snapped. Sources say he personally made a call to the king's private secretary with one message: "This can't continue." And the meaning was crystal clear. The line had been crossed. Again. And this time, there would be consequences not just from a court, but from the throne itself. A private royal meeting, father and son at war. Within 48 hours of the ruling, King Charles summoned a closed-door meeting. The purpose? To discuss the implications of Harry's judgment, and whether further steps needed to be taken to sever ties publicly and legally. William reportedly argued for immediate action, strip remaining patronages, revoke the use of Duke of Sussex in official contexts, issue a public statement clarifying the legal limits of post-royal identity. Charles, torn. He may be king now, but he's still a father, still a man who remembers bouncing his youngest son on his knee, holding his tiny hand as he struggled to navigate the trauma of Diana's death. But Charles is also a monarch, and monarchs don't make decisions with their hearts. They make them with the crown in mind. And so, he listened. Behind the scenes, the crown's quiet cleanup. In the days that followed the courtroom ruling, quiet moves were made. Subtle changes. Royal websites were updated to clarify Harry's non-working status. Internal guidelines were reportedly circulated to charities and partners, emphasizing the prohibition of HRH in relation to the Sussexes. Phone calls were made to UK and European business leaders, gently advising them to verify titles used in contracts or correspondence. The message? This era is over. Treat it accordingly. And for the first time since 2020, it appeared that the palace was no longer tolerating quiet infractions. They weren't playing passive anymore. They were enforcing. Meanwhile, in California, silence and stress. Back in Montecito, the mood was grim. Harry had gone off-grid. Meghan, according to sources, was laser-focused on optics. She allegedly reached out to a few trusted media allies to clarify the misunderstanding, framing the situation as a media exaggeration, not a scandal. But the media wasn't buying it. Because this wasn't speculation anymore. It was a court ruling. And you can't PR spin a judge's fury. You can't misquote a verdict. You can't unsend an email that begins with HRH. One royal correspondent described the vibe at Archwell as meltdown mode. Another said Harry looked haunted during his recent public appearance, distracted, terse, and unlike his usual charming self. And that's when a second wave hit. Because while the judge had spoken, he wasn't done. The unexpected twist, a second ruling may follow. Here's the twist nobody expected. According to UK legal analysts, the initial ruling, while powerful, might not be the last. If any brand, partner, or business organization feels they were misled by the use of HRH in their dealings with Harry, they may have grounds to sue. And if even one of them does, that opens the floodgates. This isn't just about royal protocol anymore. It's about fraud. And that word sticks. That word doesn't go away. And Harry's team knows it, which is why they've reportedly started a full internal audit of all documents, emails, and promotional materials going back to 2020. They're looking for every instance where HRH was used, intentionally or accidentally. Because now, every word matters. Every signature matters. Every email matters. And the next time a judge speaks, it might be in a lawsuit, not a penalty. But while the legal storm raged, another voice was preparing to speak. Not a lawyer, not a judge, a voice the public hadn't heard from in months. One that had been noticeably quiet since the Queen's passing. One that had watched, waited, and now had something to say. King Charles, and his message, would change the royal family forever. She didn't sign the emails. She didn't sit in court. But Meghan Markle's fingerprints may be all over the scandal, and her silence? It's louder than a royal decree. From the moment the scandal broke, one name lingered on the edge of every headline, hovering like a shadow behind Prince Harry's legal troubles. Meghan, not mentioned in court, not fined, not formally accused, and yet, somehow, everywhere. Because even as the judge delivered a historic ruling against Harry, even as headlines blazed with the words misuse and HRH and fine, there was one question on everyone's lips. Where was Meghan Markle in all of this? The public wanted answers. And the silence from Montecito? It wasn't just suspicious, it was strategic. Or was it something more? The woman behind the brand. To understand Meghan's role, we need to go back. Not to 2020, not to the Oprah interview, but to the early days of Archwell. Back when everything was still fresh. Back when hope and Hollywood shimmered across every Zoom screen in Harry and Meghan's new life. From day one, Meghan was more than just a duchess. She was a visionary. Her fingerprints were all over the Archwell website, the tone, the mission, the layout. PR insiders described her as deeply involved, hands-on, meticulously aware of optics. Even minor wording on donation appeals reportedly passed through her inbox. She was the brand manager, the tone setter, the voice. So when the court discovered multiple emails bearing the HRH signature, when Emily, the former staffer, handed over memos implying royal branding was part of negotiations, the natural question was, did Meghan know? And if she did, why didn't she stop it? Staffer memo, the smoking gun? In Chapter 2, we met Emily, the Archwell employee who leaked internal emails. What we didn't reveal then was that Emily also kept a personal memo, a digital diary entry of sorts. And one of its entries, now reportedly under review by legal authorities, reads as follows. I flagged the signature to Meghan during Thursday's brand call. She paused, said it would be cleaner to drop it next time, but didn't push back. Said H prefers it there for consistency. I got the sense she didn't want to argue. Pause there. That one paragraph, short, simple, almost casual, is now being analyzed for legal subtext, because it suggests awareness. Meghan knew the title was in use. She acknowledged it. She didn't stop it. And in legal terms, that's the difference between innocence and implication. The royal code of silence and its violators. Traditionally, royal spouses aren't meant to interfere in titles, protocol, or state matters. They don't write decrees. They don't assign honors. They don't determine branding policy for the crown. That's the monarchy's inner sanctum, ancient, untouchable. But Meghan, despite stepping away from royal duties, has continued to present herself as a global figure influenced by the monarchy. And according to several branding documents presented in court, many sponsors were sold on the Sussexes not just as celebrities, but as former royals with elite international access. One London-based marketing expert broke it down bluntly on national TV. They weren't paying for Harry and Meghan. They were paying for Duke and Duchess. They were paying for royal dust on American soil. And that's where Meghan's silence becomes deafening. Because if she knew that illusion was being inflated by HRH and allowed it, that's not just silence. That's complicity. Meghan's Hollywood strategy, royal by proxy. Here's where it gets layered. Meghan never directly used the HRH prefix in her own name after the Queen's ruling. In fact, most documents list her simply as Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. That's intentional. That's her shield. But here's the twist. In Hollywood, brand association matters more than title authenticity. If a deal says Prince Harry, HRH, and Meghan Markle, Duchess, the assumption for most corporate partners is that they come as a royal package. One royal commentator called it coattail branding on steroids. And Meghan, ever the strategist, knows exactly how that game works. She built her lifestyle empire, pre-Harry, on savvy, story, and controlled media. So would she really overlook a repeated use of HRH in negotiations tied directly to her and her husband's brand? Or did she simply not care? Crisis meetings in Montecito. After the court ruling, Archwell reportedly went dark. No media pushes. No Instagram activity. No leaks to friendly journalists. Behind the scenes, though, it was chaos. A crisis PR firm, rumored to be the same team that handled fallout from Spare, was brought in to assess the damage. Their conclusion? The court ruling hurt the trust factor. More than the money, more than the legality, it undermined the Sussexes' image as ethical disruptors. And Meghan knew it. Sources say she hosted 2 internal strategy calls over Zoom in the 72 hours following the verdict. Her tone? Calm, but icy. One participant leaked to a friend. She looked pissed. Not panicked, pissed. Like she couldn't believe this got out. Kate's subtle countermove. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the Princess of Wales was already making moves of her own. Not publicly, not in speeches, but in wardrobe. At her next royal engagement, a charity appearance in London, Kate stepped out in a stunning emerald coat dress. Observers noticed something strange. The brooch she wore hadn't been seen in over a decade. It was Princess Diana's royal insignia, a subtle nod to lineage, legacy, and authenticity. Royal watchers immediately saw the symbolism. Meghan had tried to sell royal energy. Kate, she wore it without saying a word. A not-so-subtle reminder of who's still inside the castle walls and who's watching from the gates. Public reaction to Meghan's silence. The backlash online was swift. Hashtag #WhereIsMeghan began trending within hours of the verdict. Conservative pundits accused her of hiding behind Harry's mistakes. Progressive voices urged empathy, arguing that Meghan might be the one trying to keep the family stable amid Harry's implosion. But neutrality? Nowhere to be found. Opinion was polarized, and Meghan's refusal to issue any public clarification only intensified the storm. Some PR experts theorized that silence was part of a distant strategy, a calculated effort to protect Meghan's own commercial brand from being further damaged by Harry's legal entanglements. But others saw something darker. She's letting him take the fall. She used the title, too, just indirectly. The Archwell insiders claim. And then, another bombshell. A second former employee, this one from Archwell's Media Partnerships division, anonymously spoke to a podcast in London. Her claim? That during a 2022 pitch meeting with Spotify, Meghan herself allegedly referred to Harry as HRH, out of habit, but it didn't seem like an accident. The former staffer said. She said it like it was natural. Like she never really stopped seeing him that way. I remember thinking, does she know that's not allowed? It was a throwaway moment. But in hindsight, it adds weight to the theory that Meghan's silence isn't about ignorance. It's about insulation. Let Harry take the heat. Let the palace burn the bridge. And she'll stand just far enough away not to get scorched. But can she escape the fallout? Here's the big question. Even if Meghan didn't directly violate any titles, even if she never typed HRH herself, can she walk away from this untouched? Not likely, because whether she likes it or not, her brand is entangled in Harry's scandal. And the court of public opinion isn't as generous as the court of law. Sponsors may hesitate. Book deals may stall. Streaming contracts might get reevaluated. Because corporations don't like bad headlines. And now that Meghan's name is being whispered in boardrooms from Beverly Hills to Belgravia, the stain is spreading. But even as the world speculates about Meghan's true role in the HRH scandal, a more shocking twist is brewing beneath the surface. Because back in London, the palace is about to drop a statement, one that hasn't been seen since the darkest days of the Queen's reign. And this time, it won't be vague. It'll be personal, direct, and devastating. They kept quiet for years, out of loyalty, fear, or both. But now, the silence has broken. And with it, the last fragile shield around Prince Harry's secret dealings. Every royal scandal has a breaking point. Not when the media turns. Not when the fans lose faith. But when someone inside the walls, someone with access, with receipts, with first-hand knowledge, decides they've had enough. And this time, that person wasn't a royal aide. Not a former butler. Not a palace spy. No, the voice that finally pierced the silence was a whistleblower from Archwell. A name kept tightly under wraps. For now, but one the Sussexes know well. A trusted hand. An executive-level insider. And their testimony? It didn't just back up what the court had already seen. It blew the whole thing wide open. Let's break down what they revealed and why it changes everything. A deliberate decision, not a mistake, not a fluke. In a sworn deposition obtained by investigative journalists, and soon to be entered into legal record, the whistleblower stated, clearly and without hesitation. The use of HRH was not an oversight. It was part of the plan. Harry approved it personally, multiple times. That sentence alone would have been enough to reignite the fire. But they didn't stop there. The insider claimed that as early as mid-2021, internal meetings at Archwell involved discussions around how to retain the royal aura without violating the agreement with the palace. The strategy? Imply, don't claim. Suggest, don't state. Leave it in the signature. But never say it out loud in interviews. This approach, what one PR expert dubbed title laundering, allowed the Sussexes to keep the air of royalty while technically towing the legal line. But the problem? They crossed that line. And they crossed it more than once. The documents, HRH in black and white. According to the whistleblower, dozens of documents passed through Archwell's legal and media teams containing the HRH prefix on behalf of Prince Harry. Internal brand proposals. Speaker pitch decks. Even donation request forms. In some cases, the HRH label appeared faintly in watermarks or header graphics. In others, it sat boldly on top, front and center, like a crown no one wanted to admit was gone. One such deck, meant for a luxury hotel chain in Qatar, was titled, The Royal Touch, Sustainability with HRH Prince Harry. Let that sink in. That's not subtle. That's not passive. That's a full-on misrepresentation of authority. And this time, with the whistleblower's confirmation, it's not just suspicion. It's evidence. Meghan's name comes up again. While the whistleblower emphasized that Meghan never personally insisted on using the title, they painted a portrait that was just as damning. She didn't stop it. She never encouraged it, but she knew. Everyone in the room knew. There was an understanding. We ride the line until someone makes us stop. This silent complicity has fueled an entire second wave of backlash. Because now, the narrative isn't just Harry used a title. It's they all knew. And Meghan's carefully cultivated image as the victim of the system, it's starting to crumble under the weight of what may be a calculated game of royal exploitation. Inside the power struggle, the split within Archewell. Here's where it gets even messier. According to the insider, there were internal arguments within Archewell. Staffers who raised concerns about HRH branding were allegedly sidelined. One was reassigned. Another quietly resigned. A memo, leaked anonymously, contained a blunt warning from a senior compliance advisor. We are dangerously close to a breach of the agreement with the Crown. I urge restraint in title usage immediately. That memo was sent. It was received, but it was ignored. And according to the whistleblower, that decision wasn't made in ignorance. It was strategic. Because the Sussex's commercial future, Netflix, Spotify, brand deals, paid appearances, was built on perception. And without the subtle nod to royalty, the whole thing might collapse. The email that broke the camel's back. The final straw for the whistleblower wasn't the branding decks or the pressure from PR. It was an email sent internally after the initial court fine was announced. In it, a top Archewell executive reportedly suggested they pause the HRH branding for the time being. The implication? Not remove. Not correct. Pause. Temporary. Conditional. The whistleblower saw that and realized nothing was going to change. The organization wasn't going to come clean. They were going to wait for the headlines to pass, let the storm blow over, and then quietly go back to the way things were. That's when the decision was made. The documents were compiled, the lawyers were contacted, and the evidence was submitted, first to the press, and then, quietly, to legal authorities. A media explosion, whistleblower Wednesday, when the news broke. When the first few documents were published by a major British outlet, it ignited a media frenzy. Hashtag Whistleblower Wednesday trended globally. Tabloid headlines screamed betrayal. Daytime talk shows debated Meghan's moral compass. Twitter erupted with theories and screenshots and memes. And in the center of it all, silence. No denial. No statement from Archewell. No rebuttal from Harry. Not even a cryptic Instagram post from Meghan. The silence this time didn't read as control. It read as defeat. King Charles reacts behind closed doors. Sources close to the palace report that Charles was visibly shaken when he was handed a copy of the whistleblower documents. For a man known to maintain a cool exterior, even when his sons are at war, this shook him. Why? Because this wasn't the press turning on Harry. This wasn't the public choosing sides. This was a former insider confirming that the monarchy had been quietly exploited. And not just by an estranged prince, but by an entire organization built to commercialize royalty. Charles didn't call Harry. He didn't respond. But palace insiders say he made a decision that very night, one that would soon become public and final. Meanwhile, Meghan's inner circle splinters. Back in California, the leak sent Archewell into a tailspin. Multiple senior staffers reportedly threatened to resign unless the Sussexes issued a full clarification. At least one board member quietly stepped down within 48 hours of the whistleblower's revelations. And Meghan? She was said to be furious and blindsided. A source close to her allegedly told an LA columnist. She didn't see this coming. She thought they had everyone locked in. The betrayal feels personal. The irony? That's exactly how the palace has felt since 2020. Betrayed. Over and over again. And now, the cycle was turning back on them. The question everyone's asking, why now? Why did the whistleblower wait? Why come forward after the court ruling? Why not earlier? Their answer was simple and heartbreaking. I believed in the mission. I believed they wanted to do good. But when I saw they were willing to risk everything, including their integrity, for optics, I couldn't stay quiet. It wasn't revenge. It was disillusionment. And it's that emotion, betrayal by someone who once believed, that's now haunting the Sussexes more than any courtroom. Because you can fight headlines. You can ignore tabloids. But when your own team turns on you, that's a wound that doesn't heal. But the Sussexes aren't the only ones with internal revolts. Because back in London, King Charles isn't just issuing quiet memos anymore. He's drafting a public statement, a royal response. And for the first time, it names names. And when that message hits the airwaves, it won't just mark the end of Harry's royal illusion. It may signal the beginning of total royal exile. The crown rarely speaks. When it does, it speaks with ice. And this time, Buckingham Palace didn't just break its silence. It buried a prince beneath it. They say the palace never reacts. They say it watches, observes, waits. But when it finally moves, it does so with the weight of centuries behind it. And now, that weight had turned toward one of its own. Because after weeks of scandal, legal rulings, media leaks, and the explosive whistleblower testimony, the unthinkable happened. Buckingham Palace issued a statement. Short, chilling, and filled with enough royal subtext to make every tabloid editor in London reach for smelling salts. It wasn't just a response to the HRH scandal. It was a final verdict from the monarchy. A cold, calculated message from the institution Harry once called family. Let's dissect it line by line and see why this was more than PR. This was punishment. The statement that shook the world. At precisely 9:00 a.m. London time, the official royal website updated. No fanfare, no dramatic press conference. Just a single, unassuming post under the heading Official Communications. It read, "Following recent developments and in alignment with previous agreements, the Duke of Sussex is reminded that he is not entitled to use the style of His Royal Highness in any professional or public context. The royal household considers the matter closed." 28 words. But oh, how they sliced. This wasn't a clarification. It was a reprimand, wrapped in royal silk. The phrase, reminded, implied warning. Not entitled was a legal grenade. Professional or public context was a direct reference to the HRH branding violations. And the final line? The royal household considers the matter closed. That was the ice. Translation? You're out. We will not negotiate. We will not save you. This door? Slammed. Why it matters more than you think. To outsiders, the statement might seem tame, reserved, even polite. But in royal terms, it was a thunderclap. Because never has the palace issued a public directive so pointed against a family member who still holds a title. Not even in the wake of Prince Andrew's scandal did the language read this sharp. With Andrew, they used terms like stepping back and cooperating with authorities. With Harry, they used denial of entitlement. And that's a different league altogether. Because this wasn't just about scandal. This was about betrayal of contract, of trust, of image, of the crown itself. The timing was surgical. Make no mistake, the palace didn't pick this moment at random. The whistleblower had just detonated the HRH scandal into global news. Harry's reputation was reeling. Meghan was off-grid. Archewell was internally collapsing. And into that chaos, the crown struck. That's not reaction. That's a power move. Sources say the timing was pushed forward after the leaked internal memos showed Harry and his team planned to pause the HRH branding rather than end it. That enraged senior royal advisors. One insider put it bluntly. It was like being told, "We'll stop breaking the law for now, until the press forgets." The palace wasn't going to wait for that. It wanted to end the story. Definitively. Brutally. And with institutional authority that no amount of Hollywood PR could spin. Charles signs off. But leaves a fingerprint. Was King Charles personally involved? Every indication says yes. Insiders confirmed the statement came directly from his private office. He didn't write it himself, of course, but he approved every word. And according to sources, he insisted on the phrase, not entitled. Why? Because Charles, for all his love of diplomacy, understands the long game. He knew that one word would remove any legal ambiguity from the conversation. It didn't matter what the public thought, what the press speculated, what Harry claimed in his next podcast. Legally and publicly, he was no longer entitled to use HRH. Not now. Not ever again. The other royals react in code. What about William? He didn't issue a statement. He didn't need to. Because at a charity event just 2 days after the palace's declaration, William stepped out with Catherine by his side, smiling, engaged, and composed. His only public comment that night: "It's important to do what's right, even when it's uncomfortable." A throwaway line? Not a chance. Royal watchers took it as a veiled reference to the family's internal war, and the crowd applauded like they'd just seen a general return from battle. Social media explodes. As the palace's posts circulated, reactions lit up across the digital world. Supporters of the monarchy celebrated. Critics of the Sussexes declared victory, and even neutral royalists, those who had tried to stay above the fray, acknowledged that something final had occurred. The HRH debate? Over. Not paused. Not pending. Finished. Some of the most viral reactions. The palace just iced their own blood. Brutal. 28 words. More savage than the entire Spare memoir. When the Queen spoke, she was velvet. Charles, he's iron. And perhaps the most devastating: they didn't take away his title. They made it worthless. Oof. Meghan and Harry, silent again, but not sleeping. Once again, Meghan and Harry did not issue a response. No Instagram stories. No formal rebuttals. But insiders say the atmosphere at their Montecito estate was apocalyptic. A top Archwell advisor allegedly told a journalist, "This wasn't just a line in the sand. This was exile with a full stop." The Sussexes had hoped for eventual reconciliation. Some even whispered that Harry still believed in a future where he and his family were half in, half out. But now, that dream was ash. And all that remained was the fallout. The legal implications going forward. Here's where things shift from symbolism to reality. The palace's statement, while technically advisory, will now serve as legal precedent for any future disputes. What does that mean? Brands that used HRH in marketing may now face pressure to retract. Past contracts signed with HRH may be legally questioned. Future litigation could cite this statement as proof that Harry was knowingly using a forbidden title. In other words, this wasn't just Buckingham Palace saving face. It was Buckingham Palace building a legal firewall. And Harry just got locked on the wrong side of it. But what does this mean for the Duke title? Ah yes, the last thread still hanging. While HRH is now officially off the table, Harry still holds the title of Duke of Sussex. For now. But whispers inside Parliament suggest that, under increasing pressure, lawmakers may begin debating the future of peerage reform. If public opinion shifts further, if scandals continue to mount, or if internal royal politics boil over, Harry may not just lose his styling. He could lose the dukedom entirely. And if that happens, we're not talking about a prince without power. We're talking about Mr. Harry Windsor. Civilian, ex-royal, outcast. And that possibility isn't just plausible, it's now probable. The palace's final playbook. What's chilling about all of this is how quiet it was. The palace didn't scream. It didn't leak. It didn't rage. It waited, watched, collected, struck. This is how power works when it doesn't need to prove itself. This is how royalty reminds the world that it doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. And in doing so, it has now reminded everyone, including the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, that no matter how far they run, the crown never forgets. But even as the palace declared the matter closed, it failed to realize one crucial truth. When you try to freeze someone out, they don't always retreat. Sometimes they retaliate. And in Montecito, one figure, tired of silence, battered by scandal, and furious at betrayal, was already working on their response. Not Harry, Meghan, and what she had planned would make Oprah look like a warm-up act. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't go on camera. But when Prince William strikes, he doesn't aim for drama. He aims for permanence. In the court of public opinion, Harry may still draw clicks, headlines, and gasps. But in the House of Windsor, Prince William is the real power player now. Not because he seeks the spotlight, but because he doesn't need it. And after months, years, of silence, strategic restraint, and sidestepping landmines left by his younger brother, William finally decided to move. Quietly, efficiently, and ruthlessly. No press release. No war of words. No back and forth. Just a series of calculated acts that would forever shape the royal landscape and send an unmistakable message. There's no coming back. Let's break down the cold, chess-like campaign William unleashed in the wake of Harry's HRH scandal. and why it may go down as the most devastating royal retaliation of the modern era. The breaking point. Enough was enough. Behind the walls of Kensington Palace, Prince William had been keeping score, not out of pettiness, not from revenge, but for protection. Protection of the monarchy, protection of the legacy, protection of his children. Because from William's perspective, this wasn't just a family feud. It was a long-term threat to everything he was born to inherit. The HRH scandal was just the final straw. But the list? It started long before that. The Oprah interview, where Harry and Meghan alleged racism. The Netflix docuseries, where William's press strategy was dissected and mocked. The Spare memoir, where Harry directly accused William of physical assault. Each of those moments chipped away at William's patience. But the HRH emails? Those crossed into legal waters. And William doesn't play games with the law. Phase 1. The royal seal is pulled. One of the first signs of William